Okay, so we are human beings, which are really natural beings. That's the way that I would now describe them. Of course, I always say we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thinking and thought, combined with feelings and emotions, create the reality that you see. And we are all connected to other spiritual human beings. But as I've always said in recent times, uh, we are now connected to an artificial uh, matrix. So that puts a different light. But I always say, to me, and I've said this before, and I won't go on, really the main difference between, this is just me putting it basically, and I don't know if I've got it right. The main difference for me, really, when I say spiritual human beings or spiritual beings, because really human beings are the only spiritual beings anyway. And also, human beings are the only natural beings. So when I say human beings, anything that is natural as opposed to artificial or technical or anything else, if there is anything else, which so really that's just putting it very simply. That's how I look at it anyway. Now, and of course, in the past, I thought there was only natural beings or human beings, so I didn't really think about the technical or the artificial to such an extent. And that also I didn't overly think about technology itself. But then again, it's become more prevalent in my later years because it didn't exist really. Of course, it did exist, but it didn't exist to where you knew it existed. You didn't use a mobile phone like I'm using now. You didn't have computers. You had TVs in my time, but even they were, like over the last 50, 60 years or whatever. But, it's all technology. It's just that we don't realise how advanced it is, that's all. And also, we probably, I'm guessing now, don't realise how technical the devices that we use, the things we look at, how truly technical they are, in the sense that I am now fantasizing here, by the way. I'm going off into fairyland again, so, if you like to keep with the reality that you think is reality, it's time to go and get a cup of coffee or something. Because, but no, seriously, but not seriously, depending on how far depending on, I really don't know sometimes. But, I let myself run away with myself, even though I don't understand most things. Most people that listen probably understand and are at a different level to me, a higher level. But but I keep it simple, and and I just make the videos on what I think. And I was about to say think is possible, but I really just think it. But the technical devices, and I don't know why I'm going on about this because I'm supposed to be going on about something else, but the technical devices that we use, I think I said this in another video, so I'm probably losing it here. Look, the any screen is a technical device. Any screen has a connection to the matrix, I think, and to the technological being and beings that operate the matrix and direct the matrix and stage the matrix, if you like. And, well, not if you like, that is 100% the technical reality that we live in. But any like there's much more to even the technology, which I don't understand at all. So I am just imagining this, shall we say. But in light of being in a matrix and that it is total illusion, total just in light of the reality that as a human being, a natural being, you have abilities, and you are not what you think you are. You don't know what you're doing, just like I don't know what I'm doing or what I'm saying when I'm making the video. But literally, that's right. You don't know what you're doing every second of the day. I see people now creating havoc unintentionally because they don't know the power that is behind their negative thinking, and they certainly don't know that it is creating a reality that they may or may not want. Some people might want it. I can't imagine why anyone would want this matrix or its reality, to be honest. But if you are of the same mindset as the matrix, or the matrix and its beings that run it, whether they be human or of the technical variety. And when I say the technical variety, because the God entity, as I said before, is a technical being. This being is not a natural being, in other words. Only humans are natural anyway, I think. Apart from some animals and what's like that. But I think that that was more like the original world, a world that I would only dream about now, and has long gone probably. So whereas like even when I was making a video, maybe 9 months ago, 10 months ago, or I probably, because I've lost track of time, obviously, even though there really is no real time in a way, but time stretched out in our thing. Whereas it's much closer for the technical matrix archon God, if you want to say that. That sounds fancy because I have to make it fancy for a video, but this God entity has gone under many different names. This God entity is a chameleon. That means this being, this being is a being of many colours. You know how I think the old chameleon used to be a type of figure that had all multicoloured outfit. or something. I could be wrong, but it doesn't matter either way. It just means that that this being can change and present itself in whatever form it wants to, because it doesn't see itself as one static, is that the right word? No, one stable single image, or one stable image persona, or but also it's not really that even that is not really the case, in the sense that this being, in the way I talk, you'd actually think that I've actually met this being and know it, and I don't have a clue. I'm just making it up. Now, this being, is like a chameleon, will present itself according to circumstances and according to, a bit like, I suppose, if you were going on a date and you wanted to impress the person that you were going on a date with. If you knew that person liked roses, you would bring roses. If you knew that person liked carnations, you'd bring carnations. If you knew they liked sunflowers, you'd bring sunflowers. Whatever. Or if you knew they liked a particular colour, you might wear, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but you know what I'm saying is that this being, a master of disguise, a master of seduction, a master of illusion. I could use other words, Is illusion a form of deception? Well, I suppose it is. You're tricking the eye, you're tricking the mind, you're creating something that may or may not be real, and with no conscience about doing it, because that is what you do. It's acceptable, and it's acceptable in our world now too, and it's acceptable by many human beings now too, because this is what I'm saying. This is how I know so much, or well, not real lot, but I know more than what I would have thought about the God entity and the minions and the demigods, etc., because they're represented here on earth. The God is represented here on earth by the demigods and by, all that you see around you. Even if you're not a demigod, you will see it too, because the demigods influence us, and then we become caricatures or little imitations of the demigods. It should be the other way around, because we live in a reverse world where everything is the opposite of what is natural or normal, because we're in a matrix which is not natural or normal, and it's out of balance too, because the God entity is out of balance. Like I said, the two circles, and we're in the center, because the human being is the frequency and vibration, and therefore has the most effect on the matrix, and they're the kind of source, they're kind of like the source, the center, the engine that that brings into being the type of reality. That is because it is essentially a kind of spiritual domain. That's how I come to that conclusion, and I've lost track of what I was talking about. Oh dear. I've gone off onto the God entity, and I'm not supposed to even. I don't know what. I've lost track of what I was actually saying or going to say. Anyway, this being is a chameleon in that sense. Changes personas, changes images, it can represent itself as it chooses to, and it chooses to do that in order to fit the circumstances and in order to make sure that it stays keeping the matrix, humans playing in the matrix by that. But the chameleon thing, the God entity, just as many humans now, like we mention over and over again the narcissistic personality type, or the narcissist as it's called in this reality now, because we've become aware of it. These humans, and these types of humans, these types of people that present themselves as humans, they also do this. They also have no real core identity or personality of their own. I'm not saying that this is so for the God entity, but I would imagine this is so, because the God entity and its minions, which are the narcissistic personality types of the Matrix, and probably many, many other beings like the demigods, etc. These people they're not a normal, natural human being, in the sense that they don't have a stable personality, if you like. I don't know if this is the correct way to put it. I could have it wrong here. They don't have, because in a funny kind of way, I often think, did I ever have an identity? Like, was I ever stable? Because I didn't feel that way. But then again, you're in a matrix. So I would imagine even the best of humans probably don't feel real stable. How could you? But there would still probably be basic things that wouldn't change over a lifetime, or shouldn't, perhaps, not unless you're, in that psychopathic kind of out of whack at the other extreme balance, like where I say there's kind of a normal in the center where everything is more balanced, where you're not too negative, because that is a set. Because once you go into that kind of personality or that kind of state, it really is a condition and a state. It's really an unnatural state. It's brought about by the matrix and by circumstances, usually. Just as the God entity itself has allowed, in a way, I found a bit strange being a psychologist to a God entity. It probably seems a bit weird, and it is weird, but the whole thing is weird. Our reality now is more than weird. At least if you are a normal human being, or even remotely one. Of course, I don't think there's any real normal, but anyway, I've gone off though, there probably is some normal. It's just that they're so rare that you're lucky if you encounter them, and also to present yourself as normal too, because you could have a normal mind and normal thinking, as I'm sure some do, but you may not be able to present yourself as normal in the reality, to where you probably don't. I've gone off here again, but gone off and lost track. But the God entity and the psychopath, narcissistic psychopath, it's a bit of a I'm no expert on this, but it's a bit of a it's like a I can't think of the word. It's like an accelerate. No, not an acceleration. Well, it kind of is, to where you could have people that are just a little bit narcissistic, and that personality would still be very mild in comparison to a full-blown psychopathic narcissist. There would be a big difference. One would be, quite dangerous to a human being in the sense that they would be so negative towards a human being, whereas a smaller version narcissist would just be someone almost who was probably just a little self-centered and needs a lot of admiration, and provided they get that, exclusively almost, they're almost happy, and they probably wouldn't be too destructive, I would think, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on that, and I've gone off. But the God entity, that is a different being altogether. That is a powerful being, regardless of ability, because of the extensive use of technology and because of the vast experience that has not been lost down through the ages, unlike a human being that, has a short span and loses, and that's all it is. There is no accumulation of anything. There's no, it'd be a bit like, be a bit like being in a library, going to a big library where there's thousands of books, and in your lifetime you're only allowed to read a few. Whereas, the God entity has been around for so long and doesn't lose any information, doesn't lose because they're in control of things, because they're running the matrix, so they have the whole library, whereas the human being is only allowed to have a few books, may not even, and will probably be given the fiction books, or probably be given books that confuse and limit them while they're in the matrix, or are given books onto how to serve the matrix. In other words, like the type of occupation that the matrix would like you to have while you're in the matrix. But either way, they don't need to really, because it's a mind matrix, and they're mind parasites. They can read your every thought, which is why it's like a god. Because I could be wrong, but like when I was younger, like I say, I don't have anything to do with any of the religions of the world, and don't understand or know much about them anyway. But I had heard that, like, the whole idea of God is that, that's a kind of being that knows your every thought, and therefore understands you, and therefore can this and that. The only part I would probably leave out is that it'd be like, that is why they know your every thought and they love you and understand you. Well, no, I would leave out the love part in the matrix. Understand in order to fit you into the matrix and make you play the game, but no, not because that is not how this being operates. This being has become in a human definition psychopathic, but not to the matrix definition, because it's a different mindset. It's not a natural feeling, thinking, creator being as a human being is. It's not like that. It's a technical, intellectual thinking being, I think. I don't know. I should use more words than that, because that's really simplifying it. It's almost intellect versus emotion, but most people would say, well, intellect should be, I think I've made this point before in other videos, that intellect should be more important than emotion. Well, actually, that's where I differ. No, because you cannot have a reality based on intellect. Well, actually you can, but it will be a negative reality, whereas if it's based on emotion, you will have a positive reality. And of course that is the idea, because this is a negative reality. It's a low frequency, because the human being has been brought to a low frequency because their feelings and emotions are made negative. You know, because you're trapped in a matrix, and the matrix is squeezing the life out of you. The matrix is hurting you. The matrix is making you suffer and making your life a misery. Because if the frequency goes higher, then the matrix changes, and that is not the frequency of the God entity and its domain. That's not how they like this domain to work. And it also may well be, and I'm going out and stretching it here because I do not have a clue, and there may be no substance to what I'm saying, but it also is possible that if the frequency goes too high, that the matrix is gone. And that is why the beings are fighting very hard to eliminate the human input of high frequency emotion and feeling. In other words, they're eliminating human happiness, because that, at this period of time, and maybe other times, I do not know, but I know that it's that because we're in the end of things, that this was essential if human beings were to stay in the matrix and survive in the matrix, you know, as opposed to being players of doom in a way. I'm not sure if I've made any sense here, really. I think I'll have to go off this track. But either way, the God entity is a chameleon, a chameleon. This being does change and represent itself in whatever form it chooses, just as the narcissist will do that. They do not have any problem in like if they have 10 people in front of them. Each of those 10 people, they are quite happy to present a totally different image or personality to, if it serves them, if it gets that person to admire and follow and be part of their life and play in the matrix, if you want to look at it that way. You know, whereas most people, like myself, you don't tend to change your personality a great deal, no matter who you're with. You might, I suppose, of course, under certain circumstances, do little things, but you wouldn't do it in a sustained relationship. You probably wouldn't even know how. But for these beings and for the personality types of a narcissistic psychopathy, they have no problem doing this, because they've never really developed a core identity of their own from quite young, evidently. They've found it more beneficial to fake things, to present something that is false. It's like a barrier almost. It's their protection, I would think, in a funny kind of way. This is not necessarily the case with the God entity. This being's thing is a genuine thing that has been established down through a really long period of time. You know, why this has happened is another story, and not one that I'm sure that I actually know. But let me just, but either way, the being has gone under many different names. That's why I don't use names to describe the God entity. If the God entity said to me right now, which obviously I don't have contact, I would prefer you to call me this, I would be quite happy to. But because it is something that has changed down through time, that's what I'm saying, a chameleon, because if this being feels like calling themselves John, they will. If they feel like calling themselves Peter, they will. If they feel like calling themselves Bill, they will. If they feel like calling themselves Gina, they will. If they feel like calling themselves Sue, they will. If they feel like calling themselves Linda, they will. You know what I'm trying to say is they will call themselves any name they want to at any given time to any given audience. Because theirs is about getting the attention and commanding that person to follow them. And I don't know if I'm making any sense here. Either way, where was I? The God entity has its own out of balance identity, you could say, or whatever. It is in the low frequency negative range, 100%. But it is a technical being, so it doesn't, it favours and is intellect, thinking, and technology over the feeling and emotion, which is the human being. The human being doesn't realise that the feeling and the emotion is the everything, because it creates all that is around. So it is a tool, if you want to look at it that way, that is vastly more far-reaching. It's not comparable almost to the intellectual technical reality, but we live in that. So the technological reality is a different thing altogether, and I do not know what I am talking about. I've lost my whole thing here. But either way, they're different, totally different things. And you see, the technical reality is not individual, really. It is necessary to combine, I think, many minds, many intellects in order to sustain the reality and to even for it to work. Individuals almost don't exist in the matrix if they are of the matrix. They take from the human being every little thing and combine it to make the reality. A human being doesn't need to do that at all, even though they are connected to other human beings. They are an independent life force. That is why they are in a technological controlled reality that drives them insane or out of balance, just as the technical beings are out of balance, if you want to look at it that way. And that, of course, is also the process that they desire for human beings in the matrix. That is what you are here for, to be processed into an out of balance creative tool for a technical matrix, but you will not create anything that is natural or normal or conducive to a natural human being or whatever. You will, because you're not in a natural world, and that isn't, the matrix doesn't want a natural world. The matrix is an artificial world. It doesn't like nature. Okay, so we'll go back to the God entity. Look, I'll go back to the video that I made quite a few videos ago, and the only reason I made it was because I was trying to draw a comparison to the matrix when I made the video on Mozart, the movie called Amadeus. Amadeus Mozart, that was the name. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It doesn't matter, I don't know much about these. I'm not that much into that classical music, although it is probably more beneficial than some of the music we have now, which is in your face of the matrix. I mean, it is the matrix music, not subtle at all. It's like, here we are, this is our world, this is our music, this is our God, this is our demigods. We worship this, we like this frequency. It is a negative frequency. Also, it is matrix influence, matrix control, matrix technology through the music going through your mind, changing your mind. Anyway, I've gone off track here, gone off onto the music, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a music reviewer, but where was I? The God entity. Oh dear, I've lost track of it. The Mozart. Yeah, that's an example of the God entity in the sense that in that movie, you have an example, and I'm just going to take the movie straight at face value, so I'm not going to elaborate or go off onto the other possibilities, of which there's always a few other, as I say, possibilities and alternative ways of looking at the movie. So I'm just going to make it up in the sense that it may not even be in the movie, but I think that it could be. But, like in that movie, you have, a musician called Salieri who represents the God entity, in the sense that this musician was a normal musician, a normal being, shall we say, okay? We'll take it literally, even though, when you're talking about the matrix God entity, you're not talking about a human being, whereas in the movie you're supposed to be talking about human beings. Salieri was a human musician, as was Mozart supposedly a human musician. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. How would I know? I wasn't around then. And if I was, I must have amnesia. Okay, so the Salieri, the God entity, it would be easier if I did have a name. There are many names this being has used down through the many, many, many centuries, and more than centuries, since the beginning of time, or the beginning of some sort of earth, and before that, of course, because this being was around before Adam and Eve, if you want to look at it that way. but either way, the whole thing with that Solari or the God entity was that it was a normal being or a normal human. Now, when I stretch this to the God entity, this is not entirely true, as I say, because you were always dealing with not a human being. So you were never dealing with a totally natural being anyway. You were dealing with a slightly artificial, technical type of being, or because it was a different creation, okay? I would think. But, essentially, like in the movie, because these movies are made to show you how this being has gone out of balance. Because that's what happened to the musician Solari in the movie. He was a normal human musician originally and reasonably content too. But became angry at the arrival of another musician called Mozart that he recognised was superior and had much more abilities and could create truly natural, beautiful music easily without even thinking, without any hassle, without, like Solari had to think hard, had to really, because I'm not a musician, so I don't understand how music, you write it and stuff, but he had to change notes, and this was shown in the movie, that he couldn't just think it and put it on paper instantly. Mozart could do this because Mozart was like a real human. That's just the correlation that I'm trying to draw in the between the movie and our reality. The movies are all of the Matrix, so they're not all going to be accurate. Just as my fairy tales are not necessarily 100% real, not unless you choose to think so. But either way, yeah, so the difference, and this consumed Solari with envy and hatred. And then he basically, you could say, became insane. This is not represented overly strongly in the movie, but it is kind of there, I think, because, he went from being a normal human person into, being a killer, because he was not going to be satisfied until he had destroyed Mozart. He knew he couldn't destroy what he was. He knew he couldn't destroy his ability to create beautiful music. So in his own mind, he could only conceive of actually just getting rid of him and destroying him and creating his death, which is what happened in the movie. And he was gloating and enjoying it too, because he went to the dark side. He lost all his faith. He thought that a dirty trick had been played on him by his creator. If you take it from the movie standpoint, he threw all his religious things into the fire because he felt that he had been cheated. He felt that he had been wronged. He couldn't stand it. And the funny thing, but what the point that I was going to make about this is that it's interesting because some people would say, and I've heard this, like one could almost feel pity A bit like in the movie The Innocents, where where the governess says to the housekeeper about the spirit that had taken over the girl, the nefarious spirit that had taken over the little girl. And she sees her crying and whinging because she wants to be with the other dark spirit, and she's grieving and in great mourning. And she said, and she has to take over the little girl possession in order to live in this reality and to be naughty, you could almost say, because they were dark spirits. But either way, not making a good point here, either way, the woman says to the other housekeeper, she says, look, one could almost feel pity for her if she herself was not so pitiless. And that is the same as with the Amadeus movie, with Salieri. Some people do actually identify with this character, with his feeling of great rejection that he had somehow been wronged by allowing another being to come into existence that was so much better than him at his chosen field. You know, he could not stand being surpassed. But either way, the thing is that, yes, you know, some people identify with that, because while you're in the matrix, you do feel, and this has certainly been true of myself in my life when I think of it, you do feel less, because you see the demigods strutting around, you see other people being more successful. In my case, even other people just being more normal, just being more free that way. It's all an illusion. It's all suppression and to make you feel miserable. So you keep playing in this matrix, if you want to look at it that way. And that is actually what I would definitely say is true in my own existence. Now, you know, you're not aware of that for most of your life. You just think that everyone else has more talent and more abilities, and that they're more successful, and that they're more admired, and all this sort of thing. Or this is all of the matrix, all of the God entity, and this is very much their game and their reality. Normal little human beings do not feel, even though they are the creation behind the matrix at a spiritual and even at a physical level. They are unaware of that, and they do not feel that they have any input into the world, most of them at all. So they feel like bystanders in a reality that they are really bringing into existence, which is really strange, because the demigods then take every bit of information, and then it appears that they are the masters of the matrix. And of course, in a way, they are, because if you worship someone else more than yourself, I use the word worship, this is not the same as liking or relating or having understanding or you know, or just having company that is pleasant, or you know, I'm saying, I'm not quite sure what I am saying here, because not being a real, you know, this reality is so twisted that, or a lot of even relationships and who is who and who to even trust, and things that are normal human things that humans should be free to feel comfortable and trust and safe in their own world. This is not the case, and this is not the reality. So it creates suspicion and, yeah, like I say, normal interactions between humans is not happening, and it's not actually permissible at the present time due to the environmental ravages of uh, invisible substances or entities which we call viruses and diseases, have infiltrated the matrix. So I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm losing it again. Where was I? So the pity element, like say, you could almost feel pity if the being was not so pitiless, or in the case of the movie, if the spirit, the dark spirit, which is the same thing except that you're at a higher level, was not so pitiless. And this is, so relating to the dark, because Salieri went dark. He went from being a normal, perhaps slightly, he was confident, but he was very proud of his achievements and his position in the world, because he had a high position. Mozart didn't have a high position, even though his creative input and his ability at that music level was infinitely higher, which Salieri recognised and then envied and could not help but set about to destroy. And this is very similar, and some people relate, as I say, to the Salieri character. And, particularly, that's right, the silly little man thing, to where if the image doesn't fit, whatever, but that's not the point. I've lost that point, I think. The point is, though, is that the God entity and its minions and beings and demigods, you can, because as a human being you can understand that regression into an imbalance or into a type of madness. What I am trying to say is that there will be no pity shown to a human being. So, as a human being, you can't help but sometimes understand how even other human beings have fallen into really the lowest pits of of darkness and destructive thinking. And you can see why. I myself have been part of creating negativity in my own life. When you do harm to another human being or neglect another human being, you set that human being up, depending on how sensitive or how much innate negativity might already be there. I don't know, because I'm no expert on the psychology thing of these things. But, and so that they feel justified then too, as the God entity feels justified in suppressing human beings and basically using them to serve the matrix, but not giving them any position. They're not, you're not going to have a position or be a demigod. You're not going to be rewarded for serving the matrix. You will serve it unbeknownst, because your thinking, feeling, and thoughts will be taken from you, because it's a mind matrix. So they know your every thought, and it will be taken by the matrix, and the demigods and those of the matrix will use your raw material to create the reality they want, as opposed to the reality that you're thinking your intent was. Perhaps, if you're a normal human being, perhaps, because I'm assuming that if you're a normal human being, you want a positive reality, not a negative one. But don't forget that we also have been manipulated and conditioned by the Matrix for a long, long time. Each generation has become more like the Matrix, which is why we have what we have, which is why I'm what I am. We're none of us are normal, natural human beings that are free thinking, trusting and comfortable and confident in a natural earth, because this is not what is. This is not the reality. So even the best of us, I would think, would be a long way from being what we're supposed to be. It's just not possible in the reality. And we've also all been subjected to as much difficult circumstances and as much negativity as anyone else. But either way, the Matrix does not allow this, especially at this period of time, because the game is, it's the game, or the chess game, or the battle between negative and positive is coming to a conclusion, and so therefore there is even less leeway, because the few human beings who are even remotely normal and who would even desire a positive, higher frequency reality, this is going to be squashed very quickly. If you're not squashed in this reality, and you're then you're probably of the Matrix and not a even remotely natural human being. That's if there's such a thing even now. I would have to, I know that there is, but we've been so pushed around by the Matrix that we're not able to function as we would like to, or as we should. And most of us don't even know how we should be. We think we're supposed to be like the Matrix, most people. We think that's our world. We think it's natural. Some people actually think that we've made progress. Maybe before the things of the last few weeks, with being shown that the reality is really a virus-ridden world, some people might have been under the delusion that we're technologically advanced and therefore doing very well. I suppose it's all a matter of opinion. Of course, technology will find a cure for the virus, no doubt, even though the virus is technology, which is kind of strange. But I suppose if a virus is technology, I suppose you would have to use technology to cure it, or to cure human beings from being harmed by the technology. This does sound quite ridiculous, doesn't it? I feel ridiculous saying this, actually, because it not only doesn't make any sense, and yet there is a bit of sense to it. And I'm actually not quite sure what I actually said there, so I should stop here before I make more of a fool of myself. But I was just trying to give myself a cue around here. I think there was something I was supposed to mention. Oh, yeah, I was actually, but I'm not sure if I should in this video. Because it was something from, I was about to say from a viewer. That sounds as though I'm making a TV show, and that's hardly the point. I consider that I'm just having a chat with some unknown people that have something maybe in common with me somewhere in the world at a rather desperate time, and that this thing is the only means of doing it, and I wouldn't even normally do it if I was not trapped and in a diabolical situation myself. So it is kind of strange, really. Yeah, because I mean, it doesn't. But either way, I was gonna, yeah, not sure. Yeah, there was, like I was going to. I don't get any kind of questions or request apart from the one about the food, which I didn't want to do either, as I said, because I don't go into food and stuff, but because someone had asked to do a thing on the different types of food, I did do it, and I will do that. If someone brings something up to me, even though I don't really necessarily understand what they're asking at first, I will have a crack at it. But if it comes out stupid or you don't agree, or that's fine too, because I will give it a go if someone says, "Oh, what about this?" I might have to look at something a little bit, but I probably won't have much in-depth information, because if it's something I was completely unaware of, as I'm unaware of quite a lot of things, so it will just be my little take on it, and it will be just like a very limited vibe, you could say. So you just make of things what you will. If you think there's something in it, you do, and if you don't, it's fine, because some things I'm quite ignorant on. In fact, before a few years ago, I was basically ignorant on everything. And like I say, that cognitive dissonance, there is a great comfort to it if you can only get away with it. In the reality we have now, I would say it's almost impossible to get away with hanging on to too much cognitive dissonance. In the past, it would almost be a safeguard, and you could probably survive. Whether that's a good thing or not, but right now, I would almost say that you almost can't. Not that in my case, not that I was allowed to, but well, maybe in my case it might have worked a bit in my favour. It really depends on, like how negative you allow yourself to become as a human being, I would now say, to be honest. That's how I would put it. If you don't allow yourself to become too negative, you can still, even being neutral in a matrix can sometimes not be a bad thing, I would think, But anyway, I'm not making sense here, so I'll go off onto that. Now, not sure if I want to discuss this thing. I've got two choices here. I can talk about Neighbourhood Watch, which is like a Neighbourhood Watch is like what they used to have years ago. They used to have a sign up down the end of my street, Neighbourhood Watch. And I used to look at it. I think I've put this in a video before and think, what is that? That's just where neighbours just keep an eye out, friendly like, for their other neighbours. Well, that's an interesting point. I've thought about that in more recent times. Like, it's a thin line. Like, I certainly, personally, do not agree with any of those sorts of things. I think if each person watches themselves and looks out for themselves, we have a fine world. But is that no different to snooping, to what you would call snooping years ago, where people would gossip and snoop and be watching, and is it not also a very thin line? Like, once you start to watch too much, like if you just go outside and you just say, oh, if you saw a disturbance, you might try to calm it down or so. Is that not is that neighbourhood watch? But if you're like sitting at your window watching someone else's house, most of the day, and or do you take to then because you get a vibe that there's something suspicious going on? Do you think it is appropriate to follow that person down the street? Then you've branched into what you would call stalking. So how far do you take neighbourhood watch? How far has neighbourhood watch gone? I wouldn't know. The sign's gone, but you see a lot of people around, and you see a lot of and don't forget that, like even with technology, you can use it to, like how far is an invasion of someone's privacy? How far is it? What am I talking about? We're living in a matrix. There is no privacy. That is the revelation. That is the mind-blowing reality. Mind-blowing reality. Mind-blowing travesty. Mind-blowing, like people want to be connected these days. Connected by technology. How far do they want to be connected? You even see, in the past, I used to see even in the celebrity realm or the acting realm or the movie realm, where once you didn't go inside movie stars' homes and see them brushing their teeth or taking a bath or walking around playing with their so-called animals or this sort of thing, or showing you intimate pictures, intimate insight. No, you didn't do that. They made you movies and you only had a little bit of information about their so-called private life. This is now acceptable. In fact, it's part of the presentation. It's part of their reality. And people seem to like it. So, as time goes on, you cross the line. But the matrix has always crossed the line. It's just that the matrix likes to make acceptable what, as the God entity, likes to make normal and acceptable what is their mindset, their technology, their way of looking at reality. Human beings are a necessary evil only in their reality. I say evil is anti-life, anti-human. But for them, humans are evil. A necessary evil that they use or have used in the past and still use now. But, they would be very comfortable disposing of the human being or changing and transforming the human being into being like them if they can do it or when they can do it. Because, if you prefer a technological reality as opposed to a natural reality, you don't see a benefit to humans that like nature and like, I know we talk and promote a lot of that stuff, but that is largely to keep the few humans comfortable, I would think. And also maybe it's part of the game, But it's not a natural realm anyway. Something can appear to be natural but not be natural. I mean, you know that yourself. You can have a photograph of a scenic countryside, but it's a photograph, And this is kind of the reality that the Archon, God, mind parasite entity and its minions tends to not only prefer, but that is the reality. Now, don't ask me why there are humans in an artificial reality, how this has happened or why. I'll have to think about that one, I think. I'll have to think of a fantasy for that one, but I'm not up for it today. Yeah, how far do you cross the line, But like I say, the line's already been crossed. The whole idea of this reality is to bring into the reality that's behind the scenes, the desired reality that has always been desired, and to even make acceptable, eventually, the true reality. To make all the ideas and all the mindset of the God entity and its demigods, etc., all a reality. I don't think I did that well, but see, I have a technically controlled dog over there, and some people are quite fine with that. Some people might even like a mechanical dog. I just personally am not up for that at all. But whether I'm up for it or not, that's what I've got, because I'm in a matrix, you see. So it doesn't matter what I think about what I think is normal, natural or desirable or a benefit. That's long since passed, because things have went into the negative realm, the vibration is low, etc. We accept a different type of reality. We accept the unnatural. In fact, I don't think we know the difference now. And I think we think it's okay, as the God entity does, to manipulate nature and reality, which I do not think that myself. I never even was quite aware of it, even really. I might have thought a little bit of playing around with things is fine. I now go in the reverse direction because I see the consequences of it. There's never ever going to be just a little bit of anything. It takes a lot of servility. That's a good word. I got that from a TV show. It's a TV show called Danger Man, where there was a great episode called No Marks for Civility, because he could not master the civility. He could not get control of his emotions when he saw injustice or negative actions on the part of the people in front of him. In other words, he got angry if he saw something that was not correct. But either way, I've gone off, and that I didn't put that very well. The dog sidetracked me over there too. See, no marks for civility. I'm meant to be calm and comfortable with the dog overdoing it a bit over there. So no marks for civility. But, you have to have civility in a matrix. But, if you're a normal functioning human being, I would think in a normal natural world, and if you had not been mind changed by, the matrix and its minions and all its influence and all its technology down through a long period of time, and just the reality that you don't know that you're in a matrix and what the matrix really looks like, and what's inside the matrix or what's outside the matrix. We don't know all these things, just as I really don't. Your whole reality is just that's why people hang on with the cognitive dissonance, because they can't deal with seeing that everything that they thought was real is really not the real reality. It's too disturbing. It twists an already angry mind that has been brutally attacked by the Matrix anyway, because if you're a human being, you're a necessary evil in the eyes of the Matrix God entity and its minions and demigods, etc. Now, before I close, or before I start to make even less sense and go more into fantasy, see, the dog is obsessively licking himself there. He gets quite addicted almost. You know, that's a Matrix type thing where they become very, very, very obsessive. What am I talking about? I've been obsessive all my life, but that's right. That is of the Matrix, when you are destructively, obsessively doing things that are negative for yourself and for other human beings. Because you do hurt yourself as much if you hurt another human being, because of the connection and because of the fact that you're all creating the reality. So that's a bit like it's happening at the moment, where some people might say to me, as I have also said in the past, oh, I'm a loner, I get a bit bothered by crowds, I don't like too many people around me. Why don't they just, go home and leave me alone? Well, that's exactly what we've got now, where everyone's supposed to stay home and avoid one another and be in fear, living inside their place, worried that they're going to be eliminated by an artificial virus or whatever. So that's what I'm saying, is that you can have an attitude, a negative attitude, and then it can, because you are connected to other human beings, it can bring about a negative reality, that even though you might not want human beings a real lot around you, because you assume there's so many of them too, which is, in reality, you don't really have that many of your own kind. You might think you do. But even the demigods, they are not of the human kind. And even though they present themselves as being very human and very feeling, and that is why you like them, because you relate to them, they are not of your kind, even if they are the most human of human, which they're not, but even if they were, because they have the Matrix, they worship the Matrix God. But either way, even if they were as human or as feeling or as the same as you, they're still not the same, because they're in a different class. They're in by a different class. I'm in a different social kind of thing. They're totally separate in their social thing. Sure, they might tell you this, they might tell you what they have for breakfast to keep you playing and to keep you interested and to keep you idolising, but they're really in their own social bracket, they're in their own castles, they're in their own, they only really mingle with their own kind too. And their kind is the elite superstars of the Matrix, if you want to look at it that way. I could use other words, I just don't get time enough to put these things together very well at a mental level, but you know what I mean. They're your stars of this technical media kind of reality. Is that the right word? I don't think I've used the right thing. But they're what you see on your TV screen or on a screen. They're not sitting in your living room with you. Probably just as well too, because I don't think they would stay very long here. But either way, that's the thing. But they do need that worship, and they do need that idolization. So they need your support and they need your attention. But they have no real relationship to you whatsoever, even though they may present that. That is like if they sing a romantic song, you think, oh, what a wonderful, loving person, like you are craving that same love, or you're lamenting that loss, love, or all these love songs or whatever, or if it's a song about something else, about, these days there's more than, it used to only be love songs, but that's where we've branched out. But the thing is that it doesn't matter. You're relating because of that song. But you don't realise that the song originally came from you, because it was your feelings and emotions and your ideas that the Matrix uses to then present their creative geniuses, shall we say. They're not creative singular geniuses at all. They're the genius of the mind technological matrix. But that is not, it's not like one person coming up with ideas, even though that's what's presented. It is the collaborative effort of 100, 200 human minds. And then it is given to the matrix minds, or the matrix computer, which kind of interprets it and then presents it as part of this reality. But it has to have a human element in order to be acceptable in a so-called human reality. An artificial reality that has to be presented as a natural human reality, even though it is not, and can never be, and never was, or at least never was in this reality. Like I say, originally I cannot imagine that a real human would have been in a matrix. But I don't know what I'm talking about here. I really don't. What else was I going to mention? Well, I should be finishing The Innocents, really, but I'm not sure that... because that movie has significance on the idea of what we are dealing with in this reality at a human level, and what human beings are dealing with. Because we don't think of ourselves as being possessed, and yet most human beings are possessed by negative forces in this reality, because it's an artificial, technical, negative reality controlled by artificial, negative beings. You've got totally different life forms and life forces operating in this reality, if you want to look at it that way. And the reason for that is because of possession to a large extent. Because if a human being becomes possessed by a negative technical being, is that human being then still a normal, natural, positive human being? I wouldn't think so. I know that when I have been angry and allowed possession, you could literally destroy. And that is usually what you do or think. It starts with thought, and then the thought becomes, as others have told me, the action. You won't be able to get control of it because your feelings will be manipulated so much by the thought, and the human feelings and emotions then have to come out, because that's how we operate. That's why it's important that we are not really in this artificial negative domain, because it mainly makes us put out, negative actions. Even if it's not like to where you are very aggressive in a full, honest way, even if that's in your mind, you will be, what's that saying? Passive aggressive. Yeah, passive aggressive. You know, when they say you're passive aggressive. So you don't look as though you're aggressive, but you're thinking it and you're doing it in a passive way where people don't notice. Underhandedly, subtly, secretly almost. That's how the Matrix works too. Subtly, secretly, underhandedly. Intrusively, but not very obviously. And even the war, the battle that has been going on in this end of the game kind of scenario, it is largely, up until now, quite subtle for most human beings, quite underhanded, quite covert is the word. It's a new word for me. I think there was a show called Covert Affairs. Yes. Well, of course, we like everything covert these days too. People think that covert is okay. That's another thing too. If humans participate in covert, yes, covert neighbourhood watch, that's right. It's like overt, but it's also covert, because if you see the sign and you think, oh, it's neighbourhood watch, but you don't know how much they're watching. You don't know how much they're watching. You might think, oh, that's a good thing, for people to look out for one another, to be caring, that's right. You don't think of it as a peeping Tom. But, you know, like I say, you know. And I was going to go on to something else, which I actually will, so that means that my innocence and the other thing that I was going to mention will probably go out the window because I will run out of space. But I lost the thought. Oh, that's no good. With that idea of, like, it's a thin line. Sometimes it's a thin line. In a way, it's really a very obvious line. But because of conditioning and the way people look at things now, that's right. Is it not good to look out for another person? Well, I would say if you know that person is looking out for you and you have given them permission and you like them to keep an eye, say, on your house or on your person or whatever, then fine. But if you have not given permission and you actually prefer your privacy and do not think you need to be to be watched, you don't think you need that support, you don't think you need that safeguard or whatever it is your reason or excuse for it is, you know, it lost the thought here. You know, isn't it an intrusion? You know, and you know, so the Matrix makes acceptable intrusions because they're already intrusion, because if you're in a matrix, everything is a game, everything is staged, everything is watched, everything is a set-up video game. The only problem is that you don't know that you're in the video game. But either way, oh dear, I don't feel good. Just talking about this is actually making me feel a bit ill. Not that I felt greatly well before, but or maybe it is other things. But in the sense that, like, yeah, where do you draw the line? Like, and also the thing is, you see, it's more like this. I'll try to put it like this, right? Yeah, because we're talking about, okay, we're going to talk about stalking. Neighbourhood watch, surveillance. What is the difference between keeping an eye on something as a form of safety or protection or caring, as opposed to being a total peeping Tom? You know, well, that's an interesting point. And, like, see, there, you know, like, okay, so we're talking about stalking. Now, look, if you go to the original kind of idea of stalking, or shall I say, what would be like legally stalking? Like if you know someone and you stalk them, but that person, and or like for instance, if you were married to someone and then you get divorced and you no longer want anything to do with that person because the relationship has been ugly and perhaps aggressive and maybe even destructive, and you might be fearful, so you don't want to see that person anymore, you want to start your own life again, but that person doesn't accept that because they're a stalker. Now, they become a stalker, so they start following you and watching you despite the reality that you no longer want to have a relationship or have them in your life. That's like the Matrix. You don't want the Matrix in your life, but it actually is your life because you are actually in a matrix, a playing game that is all staged around you. So that's this interesting thing. So the Matrix is a stalker, big time, a technological stalking machine that follows real human beings around in order to harness their mind, their thinking, to contribute to their artificial matrix. That doesn't make any sense, I know. But either way, I'm just talking about this element of how the matrix, or even people in the matrix, how it can become acceptable to be a matrix kind of being. How our very world now, which I don't agree with, I say that honestly, I actually don't. It's not a fantasy world that I like to be in. But a lot of people do seem to like it. Well, they accept it anyway. And I assume if they accept it, they find some elements of it okay. But like I say, there is a difference. I think that some of them might think, well, they might not realise how intrusive it is. They might even invite something into their living room. Even the internet and the very technology we use is very much like that. Like, actually, people that are listening are in my so-called living room, if you could call it. It's definitely not living. It is a room, but it is not living. No, there's nothing living in it. I sometimes wonder if I'm even living. Well, I know I'm not living, but I would like to. But you're in my living room because I'm making this video. I don't want to make the video. I never did. I don't want to, like, obviously I don't have the world watching. I don't think I could stand it, but the intention still was. But that's only because of the diabolical situation that this world is, and a realisation that it doesn't matter because I'm already part of everyone's living room in the sense that it is a matrix. That's the only reason I make these videos. Otherwise, I would be embarrassed and I would say, I don't want to bring people I don't know into this living room or non-living room. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm really not comfortable with people watching me right now. I'm really not comfortable with the filming. I mean, dare I say that if I was like the Matrix, and dare I say that it's not unreasonable to say that, you're not even presenting what you would normally present as a video. You might say, well, this is not real. It'd be a bit like making, when you film something and you put it to the world or put it out there to where anyone or anything could be watching. You would like to think that you're at least presenting something that makes sense. You'd like to think that you're presenting something visually pleasant to people or whatever, all this sort of stuff. I'm doing none of that. But strangely enough, it only works because some people realise that they're in this artificial matrix, and it really doesn't matter. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it, because it would make you uncomfortable, and there would be no purpose to it. And I don't think I'm making sense here, but you might follow a little bit of what I'm saying. But so it's just one big, But either way, I was on the stalking thing, so I should go back to that, because this is all about like the idea of being watched. If you like being watched, and you choose when you put yourself on display, like when you are a singer and you go onto stage and you sing to people and you entertain them, you've chose that, you like it. It's not the same as if you then watching them when they're going home, when they're tired and they want a bit of time on their own. Of course, the Matrix entities don't need this as much. They are much more comfortable with this 24-hour watching, this kind of surveillance world that we live in, this security so-called world. I mean, see, humans have been enticed into thinking that it's a benefit to have security. It's a benefit to have, it's a benefit to feel paranoid. It's a benefit then to have security and safety, and to have surveillance, and to have others watching you. Yes, even neighbourhood watch, because it's like, I'm going out, someone might burgle my house, so if I've got the whole street focused and watched on my house, I'll be safe, and if I put security cameras outside to see every person walking past, and this is only what you accept. In reality, it's one big video game, watchaholic, mad Matrix. I can't use the words. I can't find the words because I've got agitated, as you can see. But either way, or some people said, oh, like that movie, The Truman Show, that's often been mentioned to me, and I only saw it, as you know, last year for the first time. But that is kind of like that. But don't forget, in that, it's still the same thing. In that particular movie, the main character in it was watched all the time. It's literally a TV show, and he's unaware that he's in a TV show. A total invasion of privacy and of his rights as a person, and to be so, unawares. He was unaware that he was the centre of this fake reality. And of course, needless to say, in the movie, when he found out, he was horrified and distressed and wanted to get out and away from it. Even though your normal average superstar, celebrity, actor, so-called person of the Matrix would love that and do that and do live like that. That is natural for them. But then again, they're, like they're rewarded well for it. They're paid for that. Like if you're an actor or a celebrity, you're paid for giving that, and you're fine with that. You're probably of a certain personality type if you are remotely real, in the sense that what I'm saying is that many of these ones are so in contact with the technology and the God entity and all this that they're not as natural as what us behind the scenes or lower life representations of a human being in this world. I've lost track of it. I lost my words, and I'm muddling and talking and don't, even the words are not making sense, because I'm just trying to say that the dog's distracting me over there too, by the way. But I'm just trying to say that the demigods and those that get paid and are rewarded and have a luxurious life, shall we say, or whatever, it's different for them because they're aware of that. They have control over it. They've got a lot of staff and support to make sure that they're always comfortable and look good, etc. All that sort of stuff, as we well know. So it's a different thing as opposed to someone that doesn't know that they're in some sort of Truman comedy show where what they would consider ugly and embarrassing is being exposed and viewed by many, many people, that sort of thing. So that was the point there, I think, with that Truman Show movie. But either way, I've gone off the track. I was talking about the idea of stalking, right? Because stalkers are really regarded as an illegal intruder into an unwanted intrusion, even dangerous, because they're obsessed with watching another human being that does not desire that watch, does not desire that neighbourhood watch or that surveillance or that support. When I say support, it's obviously not support at all, but that it does not desire that person to be, or those people to be watching that person for good or for bad. That person's freedom and basic liberties as a natural human being are being violated, if you like, or taken from them without their consent, without their knowledge even, So, I didn't put that very well. I'm sorry about that. I'm not getting this right. I know how I think about it in my mind, but I'm not putting it across well. But either way, all I'm trying to say, it's a thin line, but it's really a clear line if you know what is correct. But in this reality, they don't know what's correct. They know that it is illegal and negative to stalk someone. It is regarded as a very negative thing to do. Even movies have been made about these things. But in reality, they really accept this as okay. Because they say, hey, there's a difference between stalking someone because you still like them and that person doesn't want you off there. So you can twist anything round in this reality for your own argument's sake. You can say, well, I'm watching that person because I really care. They might be a danger to themselves. I'm watching them for their own good. But I say that is you cannot do that. But they do it. You can't. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it for good or for negative. It doesn't matter whether you say you care. If that person doesn't want your caring, that is unwanted caring. That is an intrusion. That is a violation. That is stalking. Stalking has never been regarded as acceptable. And yet we have a whole society that participates in, watching others for the benefit of society and for the benefit of the so-called individuals. Real human beings don't want or need that because they watch themselves. They are an independent entity in themselves. They should know what is correct and what is good or bad they only have to watch their own actions. They don't have to watch everyone else's actions. Live and let live, as I always say. But this is not the reality. You know, it's justifiable stalking if you watch other human beings, whether it be for their good or not. And this is often at a community level. This can even be at medical levels. It can be at all sorts of levels. We see it. One could say that anything of any authority, if they're watching, you know, because we have laws and things, but that's still a different thing to this stalking thing. Now, I shall try to calm down here a bit and get back on track. You know, like in the past when you had stalkers, right? You know, like individual stalkers, you know, like say a man decides to stalk a lady. He becomes infatuated, or you become infatuated, yeah, with someone that you don't really know, or that even if you have met them, they choose to not associate with you. You know, a lot of stalking is where, a bit like the celebrity thing, where you have fans that decide to, you could even have fans that decide to stalk a bit. But, you know, if you're a celebrity, you are a little bit more open to it. But at the same time, it's like that kind of thing that you don't have any intention of having a relationship with some other person that secretly wants to have a relationship with you and is infatuated with you. That's the word. And then because there is no real relationship, they become obsessed with that idea. They become obsessed that they have to live their life through your life, vicariously through another human being. The Matrix does that, of course, too. That's what the Matrix does. That's what the demigods do in a way. You know, it keeps the reality interesting and keeps the reality going. Oh, I didn't put that well, but I get muddled. This whole video is now becoming totally muddled up. Let me see. Where was I? I'm trying to make some sense here, and I'm not. Yeah, like with the stalking, and I know this is ridiculous to be making a video about stalking, but the Matrix is one big, you know, it is one big video game stalking machine in a way, if you like, because, you know, if you're watching humans all the time and you're playing them in a game, and they are really, like I say, your prey, you know, you are hunting them for what you can get out of them. You are hunting them for the entertainment they provide. You are hunting them because it is a game, so that is the game. You know, you are the prey. And it's like a hunter hunting an animal. They enjoy it. It is their sport. And they see no harm in it, because they think that is what the animal is there for. It's their matrix. The animals are there for their to be hunted, to be stalked and hunted and then killed. If you look at like a hunting game, that, you know, the hunting, you know, sport that many play and in the past have played in the earth, you know. But either way, with the kind of stalking mentality, the stalkers become obsessed with the person they're stalking. They don't see it as stalking. They may even say they love the person they are watching and stalking. They don't see it as intrusion into or an invasion of that person's freedom, that person's privacy. They don't see it that way. You know, their explanation for why they do it justifies it. The end justifies the means. Their whole intention is to be able to have contact, to be able to change that person's mind, to convince them to have a relationship with them, and certainly not to. But either way, this is becoming very stupid, this video. You see, I'm just going to talk psychology here. And when I say psychology, I don't get it from a book. This has been part of my life. I have seen some of these things. I have experienced some of these things even myself. So I'm not talking totally through my hat. Most of the video is through my hat, and it's certainly muddled up enough, but if only I could piece it together properly, it would make sense. Unfortunately, I don't tend to do that very well. And for that, I do apologise. I really do, because it would be nice to actually be a bit more coherent in the videos. You know, I would expect that if I was watching a video. So, but, you know, but some people might like just watching a muddle video where they get a few tidbits, and that's okay. That's good for me, at least. At least I'm not totally wasting my time. But yeah, with that stalking thing, I have known people who have stalked. I have never stalked myself. But I understand it because I have verged on it when I was very, very young. And this is a condition called erotomania. Now, erotomania can become a real problem. We live in an erotomania matrix, if you want to look at it. See, I'm trying to draw the comparison. It's sad in a way, but it's not sad in the matrix, because for a technical being and technical gods, technical, everything is about erotomania, everything is about watching, everything is about stalking, everything is about surveillance, everything is about watching a video game. This world is just a watched video game. It's not watched by me, but it's watched by everyone else. Everyone of the matrix, because they're part of it, because they like control, just as the psychopath and the narcissist like control. In fact, they need control. That's why they have the society and the systems in the world we have, even if you take it to be real. When I say real, I mean natural. It's not about individuals trusting themselves and trusting the world around them and trusting other people. It's like, you can't be trusted. I can't be trusted because I'm fallible. I don't have the ability to run my own race. I don't have the right to think what I think. I don't have the right to do what I do, because it may or may not fit the structure of the matrix, the rules of the matrix, the society of the matrix, or society, if you want to put it that way. Society is very much the matrix. Society is a prison, a controlled prison that everyone agrees to, though. And like some prisoners that go into prison for years and years, they don't want to leave, some of them, because they find it comfortable after a while, and they're like, hey, you know, we don't want chaos. the outside world is chaos. We have a structured, orderly, comfortable life in prison. Sure, there are restrictions, but, that's preferable to the chaos, because we can't even trust ourselves, and maybe we can't trust other people, and maybe, it may even lose your confidence. The Matrix does tend to make humans lose confidence, just as prison in this Matrix, like in a prison, makes you lose confidence. If you're in an institution in the Matrix or in the earth, you lose your confidence. You become dependent on the establishment, on the institution that you're in, or the prison that you're in, if that is the institution that you've gone into. They're all the institutions or confined place. I shouldn't have to describe an institution, especially to people that watch the videos that are at a higher level than me. But like I say, I keep forgetting that I originally made the videos for an ignorant person like myself that was in the dark, that didn't know they were in a matrix, and didn't really think too much about anything. So it was just kind of to open your eyes to start thinking about why you're part of, perhaps why you're part of Neighbourhood Watch, if you want to look at it that way. Like, why are you? I know I would never have been, even back if it was real and it was 20 or 30 years ago. Obviously, these things have expanded into total systems now. But, no, I would never have been part of that, because one, I wouldn't have, I just wouldn't have, a lot of that would be because I wouldn't have been bored enough. I would have been too stressed because I was too many problems myself. So maybe if I had more time on my hands and was a bit more bored, and if there was something in it for me, particularly if it was part of a social thing or part of a community, you make friends, you might go there and get a cup of tea, or you might get a cake, or you might, there might be something in it for you. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like little social things, community things, people like to go to these things. That way they're not bored and so-called lonely. Erotomania, get back to erotomania, largely stems from extreme isolation and loneliness, or not having what you would need in your life, or what you think you need: a relationship, a love, security. You usually become obsessed with someone or something that appears to have a lot more than you, or the things you want and need, perhaps, and you become obsessed with another person that does not wish to you become obsessed with someone that doesn't share your obsession, that doesn't have the same obsession with you, shall we say, or might not even want to be even remotely friends with you. And but you don't accept that. Erotomania, but also erotomania is just where, putting it very simply, erotomania is a condition where you feel justified in watching and stalking someone else because you have convinced yourself that that person either needs it, that's the Matrix. The Matrix will tell you that this is necessary, it's a good thing, you need it, etc. But I'll stick on the person-to-person thing of erotomania, which is really the condition. And I'll leave it to you to relate it to the Matrix. Because the only reason I'm mentioning this is because of the Matrix. Because that's a bigger scale version. That's how people think. But what I'm trying to say is it's not really a natural, normal, beneficial, desirable thing to do. And it shouldn't be, because it is a restriction on the person you're doing it on. It's unwanted attention where someone wants to be left alone. It's, well, you know what I'm saying. I think, but what I'm, anyway, not sure why I'm making this video, or at least this bit of it. I'm getting disgusted with myself, and I shouldn't do that. Look, the erotomania is a very interesting condition, and I became aware of it years and years ago, long before matrices and things, and I verged on it myself on occasions. Well, maybe once, okay, but I knew other people that not only verged on it, but entertained the idea and then entertained the thought and then entertained the action. You know, I'm not to say that possession doesn't take place sometimes when this happens. An imbalance certainly takes place in the mind. You know, but essentially it's like where someone convinces themselves that it's okay to stalk someone because they love that person. Usually that's the rationale behind erotomania. You know, but either way, it's an irrational, illogical, unreasonable explanation for an unreasonable action, really, if you look at it, as is the Matrix. You know, just because I fall in love with you and become obsessed with you and convince myself that because I am such a big deal, that you really secretly love me, and that if only I can force my attentions onto you, that you will love me, that therefore my action of stalking and watching and wanting to be part of your life when you do not want me in my life is justified. That's how erotomania works. It is a sad, tragic condition, though, and I sympathise with it in a way. And that's where we fall back into the pity for the Matrix and the Matrix God and the condition, and for the regression, shall we say, into negative thinking, a form of madness almost that becomes acceptable. You know, because if you've got most of the population that are narcissistic psychopaths, you are saying that most of the population is mad. And this is actually true. And that means most of the population is psychotic. Most people think I'm psychotic. You know, in reality, you know, I do have my faults, and of course I'm out of balance because I'm being pursued by a mad matrix with the idea of turning me into a genuine psychotic, if you want to look at it that way. But, you know, psychosis then becomes the norm, because whatever is regarded as the majority or the norm is not regarded as madness or psychotic. But 40 years ago, 30 years ago, it was, because it was a minority and it was abnormal, and it still is abnormal and not natural and normal and out of balance. It's just that if the majority accepts it because they are that, then it has to become acceptable and normal, and not regarded as to where most of the population should be in therapy or seeing a psychiatrist. But then again, the psychiatrist is just as likely to be, you know, a narcissistic psychopath too, I would imagine, if most of the population is that. So that's what we have. We now have a technological psychotic matrix. And everyone in it is psychotic and technical. And that's why I say we're in a mad matrix, you know, which makes sense. But because I am the one or few that even though I've had psychological problems myself in my past, it's still like once you go into the psychotic range, that means you're totally out of touch with reality. But we're in a matrix, so what is reality? Well, look, by that I mean out of touch with what is a real normal human being, really. What is a benefit to you, where you judge you I don't even know how to describe it, but like, it sounds ridiculous to have to explain what a normal human being is. But these days you really do, because it doesn't exist that much. You should know that something is acceptable or not. You should know when someone is out of touch. But if the society and everyone in general says it's okay to be an erotomaniac, little stalker, because they believe it is important for everyone to watch everyone, to be a community of stalkers, if you like. They may not say, oh, I love you and I know you love me, so therefore if I can just get, so therefore it's okay for me to watch you. And if you only would get to know me, you will love me too, because I know that you really love me, because after all, I'm just it. I'm of the matrix. I'm the be and end all. How could you not love me? Everybody loves me, baby. What's the matter with you? That's a song off an old album. I used to think that was a fun song, because that's actually how those of the matrix think. They're like, everybody loves me. It's like all your the demigods of the matrix. Everyone loves the demigods of the matrix, or at least the entertainers. They tend to, anyway. So what's the matter with you? Tell me, what did I do to offend you? You must love me. In other words, if you're that one person that says, oh, look, I don't like the matrix, and the demigods, they're a little bit negative, really, now that I can see them. And I've lost track here. I'm making no sense. I'm actually sounding psychotic. I feel, well, not psychotic, but obviously not putting it very well at all. Now, there's the dog under my thing there. He's like, yeah, everybody loves me, baby. What's the matter with you? Here I am. I'm Mr. Dog. I am world famous. I'm a demigod of the Matrix. I am Simba, the Hound of Dracula, I think. I did see that movie a few years ago. I'm trying to be witty here, but yeah, it wasn't a bad movie, but it's a different thing when you got it in your living room. Oh dear, and now although he is the Hound of Dracula, he did nearly pull the seat to pieces over there. But either way, sorry about that. Yeah, the erotomania thing is a very interesting condition, and we now have a whole society that almost suffers from acceptable erotomania, because they think it's acceptable, to watch and surveil other people. That's a matrix. They may or may not like you. Don't forget that even in the celebrity kingdom, shall we say, or the kingdom of this matrix, not every person that I watch in a movie do I like. The bad guy I'm actually supposed to not like. But that's okay with him, because he's still famous. He's still got your attention. He's still got your adulation in a funny kind of way, because he's got your attention. He's getting your emotion. The Matrix, will, if provided you give it the attention and you feed it, it's quite happy to get your negative emotion, even more than your positive in a way. The positive emotion is for the demigods, so that they can then put their ideas and their influence back to you. Change your mind, change your way of looking at things. make you of the matrix mind and thinking and ideas and way of looking at things, and worship the matrix God entity as they do. Because they're like, why would you not? Because it's a matrix, and it's that's what it is. So that is your God. But you see, as a human being, actually it's not. You're like Eve wandering off with the fascinating duality, different being, into the sunset and saying, well, I'm going to create a new world. I'm going to create, I might even decide that I'm not going to make more of my own kind with my perfect, totally matched mate, Adam. I'm going to go off and make a different kind. Who knows what that will be? Will it be a good or a good positive thing, or will it be a negative thing? Who knows and who cares? Because I'm so much in love and so seduced that it must be okay. Even seduction is like, we'll use the word love, whereas it's really just seduction. You get seduced by someone, so you think you love them. You admire them, you look up to them, you envy them. You like things that you don't have that they appear to have. They've convinced you they're better. It's kind of like that, I think. That's what happened with Eve anyway. Because she really didn't want for anything. Adam was not anywhere near as impressed with the other being, the technical God entity that was around before even Adam himself was brought into being. This being is a chameleon that can present itself in whatever your greatest desires are. Your needs will be met because this being will give you what you want, what you desire. It won't be necessarily the true reality of the being, but it will meet what you think are your wants, needs and desires. I think. Like I say, if you want someone with beautiful blonde hair, this being will put a beautiful blonde wig on. You won't know that it's not real. And you have the technology of the matrix at your disposal to present any image or any form of seduction that that is needed or that you might desire. I'm not making sense here. I think I have to fold up. Or I just heard myself say that and I thought that sounded rather curt. I think I'll have to fold up here. That doesn't sound good for a video, does it? No, it's just that I would like to put just the little simple ideas and not, I suppose I get like the Matrix where I get disappointed that I'm not putting it right, because I know that, the demigods of the Matrix, they put these same things so well. But I'm just not in, I was about to say I'm just not in that class, but in reality, even though that appears to be the case and is the situation, they're not really in that class either. they're only in a class of their own because they are masters of illusion, and because they do get everything they have from so many sources, and because they are able to change things if it's not right, or if it isn't going to suit their persona or their image, or oh dear, or what they're trying to achieve, because an image is part of achieving a seduction, and the seduction is the seduction of your mind, your feelings, your emotions, in order to keep this matrix video game reality illusion going, if you want to look at it that way. That's what it's all about, I suppose. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't a video game illusion reality. I would say even real erotomania, if it's in moderation. If you only have a few people that occasionally suffer from erotomania and get obsessed with someone and want to stalk them and want to watch them, that only affects one person. Like I say, I verged on it myself once, a long, long, long time ago. And this can happen sometimes when you're under great stress. And if you don't have if you're very isolated and secretly very lonely, but maybe also if you feel that things are going against you too, because I was always a loner anyway. I wasn't, I may have been unhappy with it, but I wasn't aware that I was. I had got to the point where I found it okay, and perhaps even, perhaps even desirable in a way. But whether that is because of obviously conditioning from childhood and stuff, who knows? I would say it's a thin line. But I think people should be, but I mean, essentially, we know ourselves that, I'm sounding like a master psychologist here, and I do not know what I'm talking about. And, I'm not qualified, but hey, it's a matrix, so. And, we're in the end of it all, so it really doesn't matter. If I'm not making any sense and overstepping my markers, expertise or whatever, so be it, No one has to take anything seriously. Everything in this matrix is taken far too seriously. People are too easily offended, too easily upset. We need to... It is a serious situation. It is hopeless, but not serious. It is serious, but not hopeless, maybe. I don't know what I'm talking about. I just threw that in. That's a movie, actually. Or at least the movie was. The situation is hopeless, but not serious. I lost my track there. I lost my track. And I wasn't even on track, as you know, but when I've gone further off, I can't even remember what I was saying. The matrix gets you. And we allow the matrix to get us to some extent. But it's a bit nervous making a video because you want to make some sense, Okay, so, the... erotomania, was that what it was that I was talking about? The erotomania. It really is a condition where you should really, in the real condition with a human being, that becomes... So I think that a lot of it comes down to secretly wanting some sort of love or some sort of relationship with someone that's usually above their station. But that is only because the matrix has conditioned you to think that people who are in a different social level or a different part of society or have more abilities or they're more successful and they're the demigod, all this sort of stuff, even just at a real human level, like forget the demigods and their different world, which is a world of its own in a way. Even in your own reality, you could be convinced that someone down the street is much better than you. They might have more, they might have a better job, they might be better looking, they might be this or that. You can easily, and you fall in, and you convince yourself that you want to have possession of that person. You know, real humans shouldn't possess anything or anyone. No, we all know that, but we still do it. It's a different matter if it's a choice. If two people come together, they share, and they make one another feel better for that. You know, possession and erotomania is possession is a different thing. Possession is of the matrix. Possession is dominating someone, controlling someone. That's erotomania verges on that only in the sense that sometimes it's very sad because it's really someone just wanting to have a love relationship, but they've usually picked someone that doesn't want them because of the social and because of the you know, we have different what's the thing, different what do we have? We have, you know, like different levels of social status. We have different levels of social status. That's what I was trying to say. So, you know, if someone's in a high social status where they're rich and got a lot of money and successful, etc., and then someone who's out on the street almost, you know, falls in love with someone with high social status, that person isn't going to want that person on the street to be following them or to be part of their... They're going to look down upon that person. I'm not actually making sense here. I'm trying to make a point but not making it. But yeah, erotomania is sad in the individual cases that I've seen. But sometimes it can be... sometimes erotomania can be unwanted, can still stem from someone who is kind of arrogant and narcissistic in their personality too. Not always, but it verges on that if you have not openly confronted the person or offered your love or your affection or whatever, or your friendship to someone, and then been given the reply. But if the reply is no, I don't want that relationship, and you don't accept it, then then you've gone into the erotomania where you're like, oh, the person didn't probably mean it. You start to justify because you know you are going to not let that person be free. And the matrix is like that. It will not let you be free. It feels that it is entitled to your attention. It feels that it is entitled to your gifts. It feels that it's entitled to use your thinking and your feelings to its advantage. Because it's the God entity and it's the matrix. That probably makes more sense than the actual individual erotomania that we're familiar with. But it's all the same thing. Is any of it really justified? I mean, none of it's consensual. You know. You know, it's like that. And we live in a world that is like that, where, you know, and I suppose it's open to debate. I know where I stand and think on these things now, only because I see how limiting and intrusive the matrix is. You know, and it is still opinion too. Like, you could say, oh, look, if I restrict that person, in some way. It's a benefit to them because that person can't look after themselves. We do that in this world, don't we? We say, well, we will look after that person because they can't look after themselves. So we will take away a lot of their freedom and their human, what you would call their human entitlements, just basic things from them, because maybe they don't fit into our society and our idea of how a human should look after themselves. I mean, I have seen people taken from their homes just because, like myself, dare I say, that they let it get a bit run down. Obviously, it has to get to a big extreme. And I say that person can't look after themselves, like, but then you do see other examples of people walking around where they clearly don't look after themselves at all. They don't maintain themselves even, and yet they're allowed to wander around. So it is a matrix thing, I would say. Everything is of the matrix, and the matrix chooses who it wants to control more or who it wants more from, as opposed to this business of, where everyone's equal. It's all across the board. We just want to make sure that everyone is looked after. This is not the reality of the world. We all know that. It's complete equality over quite a lot of the so-called world. That's assuming that it's even what we think it is now, because what was the case even a few years ago might not even exist now, because we are in the matrix. You find things out about 30-40 years after they've actually happened. The matrix is changing all the time, and changing humans and changing their reality and changing the whole situations. But they tend to, I would say, it's a bit like I've said in other videos, where even research and how technologically advanced or how medically advanced we are, it's always many, many years behind in our reality. But eventually it comes into our reality, but usually many years after it's already been invented or already in operation, but not in operation on the surface of the matrix Earth reality. In other words, where humans are, because that's where all the action usually takes place, because the matrix revolves around individual humans, and more so now the lesser numbers, because the matrix, is everyone is more of the matrix now. Even the personality types, if you have narcissistic, psychopathic personality types that supposing they make up 3/4 of the population, you can see yourself that most is of the matrix, but that's only at a real human level, because you have technology and all sorts of other things going on that most of us are not aware of. Everything you see looks natural. Everything you see looks real, but it's actually not. The only real things are humans, in a matrix, really, if you want to look at it that way. But then again, like it said in the movie, in the Matrix, what is real? What do you see? Well, I say what is natural is real or human. That's just how I describe it, and I don't know if that's correct or not. So it's not a matter of what you can actually see or touch. It's a question of the substance of that. And I don't know what I'm talking about, so it's time to fold up. I'm trying to be scientific here, and I know nothing about any of it. Nothing at all, really. Here I'm making a video. Oh well, that's the matrix for you. See, I no longer care, because it's a matrix, and it's all, for me, it's all, of a kind of closed kind of, it would still be a matrix even if it opened up again. I think it's closed and closing down, which is what we see, but even if it opened up, it would still be a matrix. It'd just be a more livable one. So I think that would be my desire anyway, but that's not, not very possible, I wouldn't think. Not if you've got a matrix around you and matrix disciples, whether they be human or demigods or whether the God entity was standing in front of me right now, it wouldn't make any difference, They've got a different mindset and they're working for a different world than what a human being would find comfortable, shall we say. That's what I would think. But, a lot of humans have to kind of consent to the matrix in a way, or consent to the ideas and the way the matrix operates. That's why I say if you want to be part of the neighbourhood watch, as many people were even years ago, you've consented to that watching, videotaping kind of reality. You've definitely become part of the matrix, even though you don't know it. You probably think, oh, that's just an innocent little thing. It's not that intrusive. But if you were a real human, you'd know that it was. You'd probably say to yourself, look, watching neighbours, is that what a human being should do? Watching neighbours when they may or may not want to be watched, and when they're not aware of how much you're going to watch them. And do I want to be a security guard? I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm not making sense. I only know that I personally don't see these things as a benefit, and I see them as unnatural. I do. I don't see them as part of what so-called human nature would naturally do. But I could be wrong, you see, but it's definitely part of the matrix nature and part of even the humans that are in the matrix now. Some of them probably don't realise it because, it's easy to, like I say, things start small and then they escalate into a whole big matrix operation, shall we say. We have that now with this virus thing going on, for what I can see, where you have, because you bring in new regulations and things because you think that something is a killer, you put that onto the whole population and onto everyone. It's not like some people can say, well, look, I think I'll take my chances. I don't think the virus is going to kill me. I don't think it's that dangerous. And even if it is, I still want my old world to keep functioning that way. I don't want to have to stay inside. I don't want to have to do this, Most people wouldn't want it anyway, but they would say it's a benefit. They go along with the consensus, with the matrix. They say, well, look, this is a good thing at this time. It's a good thing to restrict your freedom, because it is restriction of your freedom, because obviously, if you have to have more regulations, you can't do this, you can't do that. Some people would say that's just wise, that it's just been sensible in a different situation, and it is true. It is wise and sensible in a way, if you even look at it logically. But it is of the matrix, though. I mean, you must realise, though, that it is a matrix game So all these things become part of the matrix, and then they play them up to the hilt, and then it's fun to watch all the different new activities around regulations. And this is all low frequency for humans, because humans are stressed if they're restricted and if they have to restrict their activities, their normal activities that they once thought were normal. If you can't, if things close down that you normally went to, and your normal social activities. If you're, your sports, you can't watch them on the TV. This gave you pleasure. This brings your frequency down, your vibration down. So you are then really playing in the matrix, and the matrix is playing you. And you're not going to ever then have, not that you can do much about it, because if once things become an accepted norm of the matrix, particularly if it becomes like the whole matrix, which it is, all these things become the whole matrix. It's not like you have some areas, like I say, where things are at a different frequency and different activities are going on, and it's like we used to have. Now it's becoming all the one. And that's why it's towards the end of things, because it was never always like one, and it was never normal for it to be like one, because you had different countries and different so-called things like that. That's if you know what I mean. But I'm not sure I know what I mean myself, and I'm going to fold up now because. Or should I finish up on something? I think I might leave it to another video, because I might just have a look at that photograph that I was supposed to look at a few more times, because I was going to do a video on a photograph that had been brought to my attention by someone else. I was not familiar with it at all. I was not familiar with the book. I don't follow I don't do all that sort of stuff. I have no knowledge of that sort of stuff. I haven't read books on all sorts of philosophies and things going on in the world, past, present, and future. And this was like hundreds of years old too. So, but I don't know any of that sort of stuff. In fact, it's strange that I should be making videos talking about a world and stuff, because it's really not been my life or my bag at all, shall we say. Not at all. It shows you how a world exposing itself and, trying to bring a negative frequency or keep control of a reality, can really change things. But, of course, it's took me a long time to realise that too, because, like I say, originally you just tend to think, the whole idea though, of course, is for you to think that your reality is crazy, and know that you're crazy though, because that's the whole thing, is because if a reality becomes too unbelievable, you could easily actually say, well, look, it must be me. Just like I said most of my life. I said, the world is not that negative. It's really that I'm just negative because I'm the one with the personal problems and things. I'm the one restricting myself. The matrix isn't restricting me. But you just don't realise that the matrix is what sets up the reasons and it's not always successful, but most of the time it is, I would think. Setting up circumstances and situations where you will feel, where you will get negative, where your feelings and your emotions will be turned into a negative way of looking at things, a negative way of feeling about yourself and everything around you, to where you will feel dissatisfied and uncomfortable and insignificant, but and much less than what is natural for a human being to much less than what is natural or normal for a human being to feel. And then you will overcompensate for this unnatural feeling, because it will be so frightening to feel so vulnerable that then you will overcompensate by becoming a narcissistic, psychopathic personality type that has no real identity and lives their whole life controlling everything because of their own personal insecurity, which was really created by the Matrix, because no human being should really feel insignificant or insecure. Not when they're really the centre of the Matrix and the engine that works it, in a way. It's kind of tragic, really. But that's our story and that's our history, and that's where most of us are now. Even those that realise it are even more into that, because the Matrix will make sure that you can't realise that reality. You can't access those abilities. You can't now live in a reality where you feel content, that you're not, that you don't have any belonging. I'm not putting this right. Because really, you don't belong in the Matrix. Or the Matrix has become an inhospitable environment for a natural being, a human being. I'm confusing myself here. I better fold up, I think. I'm not sure if I get frustrated with myself. I know I do, but see, that's the Matrix too. People, it doesn't matter who or what you are, you shouldn't. If we knew the limited numbers and the Matrix and how things really worked, we wouldn't feel that way, and we're not meant to feel that way. But we do, because the Matrix is still there and it's full blast now. So when I say full blast, it's not to where you can, that old saying that I've said before, it's not my saying, it was certainly not my saying, but to be in this world but not of this world. To just be aware is not going to put you in that position. Certainly not in my case anyway, and certainly not probably I would say in others. It is not going to give you a great deal of benefit. You're still going to be in this kind of horror movie or nightmare, and unless you crave that excitement and you like a challenge and you don't mind, you would have to be out of balance to actually enjoy being hurt and being limited and being pulled down and being mutilated in a way, because I need the right word, but you're being I can't think of the word, sorry about that. And I think I better fold up because I've lost my train of thought. But the matrix does damage to anything that is natural. Because it's damage if you are not at full natural capacity in your body and in your mind and in your feeling and in your emotion, which is your main driving force for your reason for being in a reality. But of course, you're not in a natural reality, so that's the reason why all this is happening. I didn't put that correct, but I think you probably might get the kind of gist in a way, or the idea. Well, I'm sure those that watch do actually. It's just like everything as it is at odds. Everything is. Human beings are at odds with themselves and at odds with their reality because of this. They can't get that balance. They can't be a natural, normal human being. A balanced, I use the word balance only because everything is out of sync. A human being is out of sync because they're in an unnatural environment. They're in a matrix that is not conducive for them, and it's deliberately not trying to even be conducive because it's like you want to be in you might not want to be in a nightmare type situation or a nightmare reality or a nightmare dream or a nightmare hallucination, even if you like, or some people take substances and they have, I've heard that they can have very horrific kind of experiences or hallucinations, and they don't like that. Others still keep repeating it, I think. So, I don't know what I'm talking about here. But I will say this, I know myself from my own experience and my own way of thinking that some things that some other people would consider exciting, in Earth, I actually would consider frightening too, so there's that too as well. The old saying, one person's pleasure is another person's pain, or another person's pain is another person's pleasure. I just made that up or just come to me, but that is another point. That might seem strange, and in some ways it is strange, but that is because human beings can also change their way of thinking, their way of their enjoyment of things, and their it isn't a benefit to them. I don't think it isn't a benefit for humans to kind of accept and enjoy things that are a bit painful. It really isn't, but it could become acceptable to them. It can even become an addiction if your mind gets used to that, or is being conditioned to find some sort of pleasure in pain even. I certainly should have done that myself, because then I would have been prepared for the end game of the Matrix. Unfortunately, I never did that. So, a little bit at odds there, unfortunately. Yeah. But as a fact, it's baffling to think this, but it is actually, it is some sort of condition even. It's a condition, but it's actually accepted as a syndrome even. I think it's a syndrome of some sort, where a person in their mind, because they get used to experiencing suffering or pain or something, actually start to kind of like it, or because of the trickery of the Matrix, or because of the trickery like of a warden, say in a prison, where they're actually your warden, That goes to the movie The Night Porter, yeah, which I have seen years and years ago, where the sadistic guards and controllers of a prison or whatever treat their prisoners rather badly, and use them, just as the Matrix does too, that's another thing, but uses them in ways that they wouldn't normally find acceptable, but occasionally then gives them something nice or some kindness or rewards them. So then that warden, that prison guard, appears to be loving, and the victim actually ends up loving the warden or the prison guard, because they've only got the comparison between hurt and then a bit of kindness or a bit of love, and it tricks the mind somehow. I'm not quite sure how it does, but it is a syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, I think that's what it's called. I only learned about this about a year ago, but strangely enough, I had seen the movie The Night Porter many years ago, which is really about this syndrome. In fact, it becomes obsessive. In the movie, it became obsessive to where two people that were originally enemies, almost you could say, because one person was being badly mistreated and used by a more superior authoritarian guard or person in the movie. The victim ends up falling in love with the authority figure that they should actually be glad to get away from and actually dislike. Instead falls in love with him and becomes obsessively that way to where they can never leave it alone. It leads to their downfall in the end of the movie. Which shows you that humans can be, their emotions and feelings can be very much controlled and manipulated, not just by a matrix, but by individual humans. That syndrome is a fascinating and rather interesting. I thought the movie was strange in that respect. I didn't know about the Stockholm syndrome when I saw it years ago, but I was fascinated by that idea. But I could see how it was like that. But I guess at the time I just put it down to thinking that the guard liked the lady in it, even though he was supposed to suppress and control and subdue her and treat her not respectfully, shall we say, as a human being. That he had secretly fallen in love with this person. But you see, that's the point. That did actually happen in the movie, because it showed that, because that was how the movie went. So there was genuine liking for the authority figure for the victim. But the victim should probably logically, at a realistic human level, never have actually fell in love with the prison warden, guard, or the authority figure that was out to dominate them. Because even if that person did love you or like you in some way, or even respect you or whatever, they were not really showing you that most of the time. They were belittling you. They were inflicting pain on you. It's a trick of the mind and a madness of the matrix and insanity for that to happen, and yet that does happen and can happen, and it is a scientific, medical, proven reality, or fact if you want to look at it. But it defies all logic. So humans can be, because of their psyche or whatever, very much tricked and manoeuvred into thinking and behaving and doing things that they shouldn't really do. You know why this is that sort of syndrome. Why it is an interesting thing, but it's a comparison, you see, and I think the Matrix is very much of a Stockholm syndrome matrix. It it can be very negative, but then it can sweeten with a bit of positive, and the human, in their infinite trust and innocence, goes for the sweetener and thinks the sweetener then is the whole thing, and then forgets the negative, and but focuses on the comparison. This is done rather cleverly, I would say, by the authority figure or the Matrix, if you like. I'm not sure that made any sense. It sounded all right, but I'm sure that it actually makes sense. But certainly that syndrome exists, and it's very interesting, to say the least. It is a negative distressing syndrome, really. So it's a matrix syndrome, I would have to say. Everything is of the matrix, so it's interesting. And yet they made that movie, The Night Porter, about it. Some people think that that's a romantic love story movie. It's really not at all. I'm not sure why we would think that. I was interested in it, but I still was, dare I say, I have to say, a bit sensible enough to where I still thought, hey, that was kind of illogical and stupid to go back to someone that is going to really cause you destruction, and was negative in the start. Like the Stockholm syndrome can become an obsession. You, as a human being, your feelings and emotions can be exploited, can be used against you. I would like to explain that better and go into it more, but I'm out of time, and it's a bit of a complicated syndrome. Even I'm not sure that I fully understand it, but I might talk about it again if I get my mind clear enough on it. I'm getting a bit weary now anyway, so I'll fold up. But it just shows you, though, that the matrix, and even human beings, and even acceptance of bad behaviour, negative circumstances, negative people, negative actions, all these things, human beings are not meant to really be exposed to all that negative thing. They're not meant to entertain it either, and we entertain it too. I mean, that means that we take it into our mind and then accept it as normal. We all do. We all do. I've done it too. I was going to mention the erotomania in relation to myself, but I don't think I will. But no, I never did actually ever. I've never stalked anyone, and I have no desire to watch people. I find it, I'm like, it's, personally, I think it's boring to watch people, just to, like, if you can't do something yourself, I would actually say it would be irritating for me to watch someone else doing something when I could be doing that same thing probably. But you see, that's because I'm not of that negative. I'm not that far gone. I am far gone, but I'm not that far gone that I've ever had to, that I'm so negative that I watch someone else that may even not be doing much just because it gives me a buzz, because I kind of want to bring that person down, or I don't want to focus on fixing up myself, or that's right, that's because that's essentially another thing too. A lot of people of the narcissistic psychopathic personality type, they don't want to focus on themselves. They never want to have, that's right, as I was saying somewhere, that they don't want to have that insight or want to ever look at themselves. I've seen this with people I have seen over the years. They never ever look at themselves. It's always someone else. It's always someone else that has the same faults, or someone else that's doing something wrong. But they never see it in themselves, and they never ever, not even a little bit. I mean, I know most of us don't look at everything that's wrong about ourselves because, yeah, it could be a bit distressing, but essentially they never do it ever. Whereas real humans often do, will know, and focus and know that they've done something that's negative. And they never do. They never, they get the narcissistic and the psychopath is always like, it's never my fault. I have never done anything wrong. I never lie. I'm for real. And yet that is the complete reverse of what they always are. They fabricate everything. They're a chameleon, like the duality demigods of the Matrix and the God entity itself, in a way, because the God entity has turned his children into replications or replicas of itself, which makes sense, I suppose, in a way. But there's no sort of like individual free choice or freedom to actually be your own identity. That's a human thing. But if you're in the Matrix, it's not a human thing either, because it's not allowed as a human being. You're not allowed to do that anymore as a human being. And you probably never have been for an awful long time. And, as human beings have devolved into being more of the Matrix too, they think that is okay. But I wondered now, like I said before, that the psychopath holds the key and always has to the Matrix, and certainly in my own personal Matrix existence, the people around me and in my life are all of that personality, all of that human type in a way. So they very much influence and control the reality. They are the key to the Matrix, or to the Matrix destiny in many ways. Not the whole thing, but very much, because if you have vast numbers and like I say, it's still a human choice matrix in a way. It just always has been and has to be for whatever reasons, and I'll leave those reasons to yourself. So therefore they do hold a big key, because if the human still is a deciding factor in the Matrix, humans have to be enticed to be of the Matrix. Human beings have to be enticed to be negative, or conditioned to be negative, or literally, I suppose, attacked by the Matrix to such an extent through a lifetime that they become naturally negative too, if you want to look at it that way, I suppose. Every traumatic experience a person has, every negative experience, is an attack of the Matrix, whether it be by humans in the Matrix or by the set up Matrix video game. Makes no difference, because it's all from that same it all comes from the Matrix, that same source, if you follow it, It's not a human source, it's the source of the Matrix, and the Matrix God entity, which is a technological source. So its video game is a technological game, and it's not a human game. It's a human game only in the sense that humans play in it, but it is not a game designed for humans to be human in the Matrix, no. It's not a game designed to where humans expand themselves. It's just about playing in the Matrix game. And the humans are not, like I say, it's like a hunting expedition. The prey is the target, and is the importance and the purpose of the game, but it's still insignificant to the hunter. Its value only is in it being it's a necessary component of their game. They don't want to hunt. They want to hunt the animal. They want to hunt. They want the human to play. They prefer the human to play than their own kind to play. It's anyway. Not sure about this video, to be honest. I think I went all over the place. Okay, so good night.